This week's episode is about out of season sailing. We're just back from 6 weeks sailing in the Mediterranean out of season, and that's what this footage is going to be based on. But we're no strangers to winter sailing. We've spent a lot of winters sailing up on the west coast of Scotland, and it gets hairy. So we're compiling our experiences into this video for you to give you an idea of what it's like, if it's really for you, and how to best prepare for winter sailing. And to kick things off, we're going to talk about what comes to my mind first when you think about winter sailing, and that is storms.
Okay, so it's 4:30 in the morning. The whole place is lighting up. We're now on a lee shore. Second thunderstorm that we've been in. I don't know if it's a couple of squalls or what coming through. So a lee shore is when you're getting blown onto the shore, which is not really what you want. We were supposed to be blown offshore tonight. There's not a great deal of room to drag, so thankfully we've got a good anchor. It's belting it down!
A big part of preparing for storms is your sail plan, and I'm going to leave that to Chris to go into for you towards the end of the video. And we're going to kick off by talking about anchorages and how to safely anchor when you've got storms happening out there. So I'm going to pass you over to Chris to get going on that one.
So sailing in the winter, it's indefinitely unpredictable. The weather systems aren't as settled. We can never really trust anything. At some point you're probably going to be running from bad weather, and of course if it's really bad, keep running into safe sea if you can. But if you can get into a nice safe cove and it is safe, we're going to drop the anchor. For me, I would always have 2, 3, maybe even 4 places to anchor, and I would have checked them out well in advance. They would be from different orientations, knowing that the weather might be slightly unpredictable, so you can't necessarily trust the weather there. And I'd also know how deep they are regarding my ground tackle. Can I anchor there? My minimum scope that I would use is a 6:1, many would say 7:1. So a scope, what that means is the depth from the bottom of the water to your bow roller, and times that by 6. That would be a 6:1 scope, and the number that you get is the length of your anchor chain. That's a minimum. So that's great, and also be aware, if you're not used to using that amount of chain, you really want to start thinking about what your boat's going to do when it drags and swings, because you might be in a small cove, there might be another boat or two maybe, but there's also things submerged. Just be aware when you're running such large scopes, there's a lot of drift. So that's good. Other options to think about here are how you're actually going to anchor. So many bits of advice on anchoring. Storm anchoring in general comes in 2 types, 1 or 3. One is an enormous anchor. That's good until your windlass doesn't work. Another one is to put out 2 anchors at 90 degrees to each other. So as the boat swings, weather vanes so to speak to the wind, each anchor is independently helping the boat. And when it's pulling straight back, it's through 2 anchors. Commonly used technique. And the other one is to run 2 anchors in tandem. So the chain goes out the boat to 1 anchor, and then on another piece of road or chain, another anchor directly in front of it. That's my preferred technique. I would use that because it's simple. You're not going to get the 2 anchors tangled up, and people know, they can see roughly where your anchor is. Maybe in a storm anyway, they're going to know your anchor's pretty straight, and they know your anchor's out there somewhere, so they're unlikely to drop their anchor on top of your anchor, as opposed to the 2 out, because you've got 1 over there that someone hasn't even thought about. So that's our anchoring techniques.
So of course the ideal thing is not to be running from a storm and not to be hiding from a storm, and I guess the best way to do that is to be up on your forecasting skills. So there's so many weather apps out there that you can use to help you with this. The one we currently use predominantly is Windy. There's various others out there like Windfinder, Predict Wind, all do slightly different things. You basically have to work out what you prefer working with and what works best for the area you're in. Now it's important to look at different weather modules within the app and understand what's going on and really check in with its accuracy. So check it out, understand if that's what happened, and if you're finding accuracy, then you're going to trust that app and you'll continue using it. Another important thing is understanding what's happening like further afield around you in terms of pressures coming in and out and the accuracy of that. You can be looking at synoptic charts, so further afield, to understand what pressures are moving around you and how that's going to affect you. Now that's been really important for us, particularly in the Med, when there was quite a few anchorages that we lost signal. Now it was only because Chris was up on what was happening around us. He could sort of foresee and predict what was happening in a few days, so as much as we didn't have signal on the phone for using these apps, but also we were struggling to get even the shipping forecasts. Now for those of you who are interested, I think it's fantastic. The shipping forecast in Spain comes through in English as well as Spanish, which is just superb. But we'd lost line of sight for VHF, so we didn't have that either. So looking at these pressures that are happening around you really helps you sort of forecast a few days in advance to try and help you gauge what you're doing and where you're going. Now, on that topic of timings and gauging what's happening, naturally, sailing out of season, the weather is more unpredictable than summer sailing, say, but it doesn't make it more exciting. But on that note, we tend to try and have plenty of supplies on board. So you want to find the locations like close by that you can stock up on food. And basically we made sure that we had a good couple of weeks food reserves, so that if you get storm-bound or locked in an anchorage because you can't leave because of the weather, or you can't go, to that side of the island where you're planning to top up on your favourite snacks because the wind just simply isn't allowing it, make sure you're stocked up with food so you can sit out a storm and you'll be hunky-dory. On a more personal note, I can 100% say that I loved out-of-season sailing for so many reasons, but I think the main one just being how amazing it was to have these beautiful anchorages all to ourselves. I mean, peak season in the Med, these anchorages would be rammed and we had them all to ourselves. They were just amazing. And there was some sort of gusts and things to keep you on your toes, which is just good fun. I guess you can never always get it right, you can't always get the forecast right. It's pretty unpredictable out there, and it's like that storm that we got caught in that anchorage where we're on a lee shore. It was pitch black, but the thing is you just have to be prepared and know what to do in those situations, so it's never never too dramatic. And one thing I forgot to say about forecasting was just really reading the localized weather, so forgetting about apps and shipping forecasts and just read the clouds. So the clouds can really tell you an awful lot. And a good example of this was we woke up one morning and there was just this huge dark band of grey cloud over here, and didn't take long before Chris was like, we gotta go, we gotta get out of this anchorage and move on because this storm is gonna get us. So he worked out by following a technique that tells you what way the clouds are moving, and basically that dictated what way we went around the island to basically run from the storm.
Can't have winter without storms, right? But before we go any further, this isn't a how-to on storm sailing. This is not a heavy weather sailing video. This is just an account of what we do and what we used to do on our previous boat, let's say. So most of the time we can sail with our normal sail plan. So we have 106% jib, or genoa. It's really small genoa, and it's a nice flat cut main as well. The reason we have this is it runs in and out of the furling system on the mast nicely, and on the foresail it allows us to easily tack without having to stress too much, and we can use a spinnaker for faster sailing if we wanted. So when it comes to heavy weather, we can run our system that we have reefed down nicely front and aft, and it can easily sail to 25 knots without having to change sails. Once we get around 25 knots, if we reef in anymore, we end up with this bulbous area at the front of the mast where it's wrapped around the forestay, the sail's wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. This void now, which is created in the airflow, creates drag. The boat heels over at that, so at that point we have a secondary forestay we use, and we put on a staysail, which is cut flatter, and that's really good. We can sail the wind with it, we can sail downwind with it, and that'll run us up to about 40 knots of wind, at which point we would have also rolled in the mainsail. So if you're on a standard main or something like that, slab reefing, you're going to reef down to match the power of your foresail, keep your boat's balance correct. So maybe if you're going into heavy weather, or potentially, or you may want to think of a third reef. Some people have 4 reefs, but that depends on you and what you think your boat needs and what you need. A storm sail, so that's a storm jib, that flies off that second forestay as well. That allows us to depower the boat further. It's cut even flatter than the staysail, so basically a lot less powerful, but it still keeps us with good momentum and control over the bow of the boat. And we would pretty much just run downwind with that if we needed to, and we would always try to run downwind. But if you need to beat to weather, we also carry a trysail. So we'd roll the main away, or on a slab reef we would drop the main, and we would hoist this trysail. And the trysail is cut really flat, and it's also really strong material, so that will allow the boat to be nicely balanced, allowing you to achieve some upwind sailing. I mean, I really do not like the idea of doing that, but if you had to do it, that might be the technique you would use to get around a headland or something like that. So we do carry it in case. Never needed to use it yet. Other things, drogues, sea anchors, things to slow the boat down. Slowing the displacement craft down is a great idea. Things may be different if you're on a planing craft, but for most of us, we're on displacement craft, sailing away there, and we don't want the wave to pick us up and spin us round, because basically we're going so fast that the bow's digging into the water and the wave basically comes from behind and spins the boat round as it overpowers the rudder, and then you end up on your side, or if you're really unlucky, upside down. So I don't carry a drogue, basically because I think in that kind of weather, we've been in nasty weather in the past, it's not so easy to just say, oh, I'm going to tie this rope around here. Just keeping a hold of the boat and staying on it's hard enough. So we would either lay a hull, which wouldn't be a preferred choice, that's just tie the helm off and go down below, or what we would more likely do is to heave to. Heaving to is a technique where you have your sails set so they work against each other, which is preventing motion of the boat. The bow of the boat lies pretty much 45 degrees up the waves, so you're always cresting up the waves at the right angle, and the power of the sails basically cancel each other out, so you can go down and have a cup of tea, and the motion of the boat's a lot more comfortable than when you were trying to fight it, let's say. So that's our technique. Maybe that's of help, I hope so.
As we said earlier, this is by no means a heavy weather sailing guide. It's merely an indication as to what it might be like out on the water, out of season sailing, to give you an indication of whether you fancy it, if it's for you, save on those winter mooring fees. And if there's any of the topics that you guys want to know more about, or a different topic, then drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear, and we will absolutely see if we can incorporate it into a future video. And if you did enjoy what you see, we would really appreciate a like and a subscribe. It means an awful lot to us. And we'll see you in the next video.